Hello again, I'm Fred Baining, and today what I'd like to do is give you a visual tour of the Porsche 924S Electric, give you some insights into the component choices, some of the design decisions we made, and the seat of the pants engineering that goes into any project of this type. Following that walk around, what I'd like to do is go for a ride, so hang on, we're going to have some fun today. I'd like to begin our tour at the rear of the car. And if you look under the bumper, you'll see a couple of silver things hanging down. That's actually the battery boxes that straddle either side of the transaxle. And as we approach the rear of the car, what you'll see is that the two battery boxes contain complete 16-can modules from the Better Place pack. And the third 16-can module has been broken up. There are 6 of the modules in the center there, riding the top of the transaxle, and then another 10 over that. So we've minimized the high weight and kept the weight as low as possible. That has had a couple of effects. First is that it makes the rear of the car hang pretty low. We've added roughly 400 pounds to the hatch area, and so it rides a bit low, and having removed the gas motor and replace it with the electric and so forth, the front rides a little high. So we're a bit nose high, tail low, and we're going to be adjusting that stance and that ride height over time. But for now, it actually handles remarkably well. I'm delighted with it. On the left here, you see the maintenance disconnect switch, and that incorporates the traction pack fuse. And on the right, you see a white little module. That's the 20 amp fuse for the DC-DC converter, which rides directly in front of the upper pack. And the DC-DC converter is from a Chevy Volt and puts out more than enough power to run the 12-volt system of this car. So there's a 20 amp fuse there for that purpose. Next to that is a little black box which contains the EV-TV controller for that DC-DC converter, the AVC2 charge controller. You can see all the wiring leading up to that. And on to the right of that is an inertia switch, so that if I get rear-ended, it shuts down the whole system. And what you don't see is underneath that panel is a contactor, the mid-pack contactor, which is only enabled when the car is running or charging. One other little interesting thing down here, can barely see it. Let's see if we can get closer. There it is, little switch. That little switch is actually connected to the enable line in the JevQ, so that by throwing that switch I can basically put a security on the system. It won't start under any circumstances after that. So that's haven't used it yet, but it's there if I need it. So that's what the rear end looks like. Moving to the front of the car, we'll stop for a moment here and take a look at the dashboard. The round device to the left is a Intellitronics LED GPS-based speedometer, so I really don't have any direct connection to the rear wheels, and there's a little GPS antenna on the dashboard. To the right of that is an Andromeda EVIC, Electric Vehicle Information Center, which displays all the electric stuff that I need to know about. You'll see that in more detail when we get in the car. And of course the shifter and steering wheel and so forth. Moving forward to the motor bay, on the driver's side, you'll see that we have the electric air conditioning compressor down below there, power brakes of course, the DMOX 645 inverter, and above that the JevQ controller. That's the heart of the whole system. That's what makes it all work. Behind that is a circuit box, and inside there is a spaghetti mess full of wires going every which way. I know where they go, but the casual observer would be rather at a loss on that. Moving around to the front, the little black box on the front of the DMOC is the charge controller, and if we look further down into the motor bay here, you'll see that the Chevy Volt charger is hanging off the front of the bracketry that mounts the inverter to the motor. And that controller has a bit of selective amnesia. It remembers how many amp hours have come in but it doesn't remember your charge voltage and end state. So I've got a project ahead of me. The controller in the rear that manages the DC-DC converter is a newer model. It maintains the settings quite nicely and will manage both the controller for the DC-DC converter as well as the charger. And I'm going to run a set of CAN lines from the back to the front and modify that so we'll run the entire system, both the DC-DC converter and the charger, off of a single controller. Moving to the passenger side, you'll see the two catch tanks for the cooling system. Those are mounted above two Pierburg pumps, one for the motor and charger and another for the inverter. And I'll be reworking this soon. I have the Derail 2 dual branch cooling system. It's buried down there and underneath the red cowling, and it's turned out to be perfectly adequate for going around town. But when I get on the highway, given that the motor is sharing the cooler with the inverter, it heats up the inverter and I wind up with a thermal derating situation, which can be a bit alarming at 65 miles an hour. So I have purchased an aluminum racing full-sized 924 radiator, and I'll be running the motor off of that, and I plan to run the charger and inverter off both sides of the Derail cooler. So we'll see how that works out. Directly behind the two catch tanks there is the contactor box from the Better Place pack. And it's a long story, but I've blown up more contactors than I care to admit, and the first contactors I blew up were in this very box. And the reason for that was a short in the wiring box back there. So I moved on to a couple of Gigavac contactors and a pre-charge resistor, and wired it in several ways and kept blowing those contactors out. And I've finally come to the conclusion, although I have no basis for this in testing, that the pre-charge resistor that I had is just not sized correctly. So I was able to locate some contactors to go back into this Better Place contactor box and put it all back together with the pre-charge relay and the pre-charge relay, the pre-charge resistor and the pre-charge resistor relay that were designed for the Better Place pack, and it seems to be working very, very well now, so I'm pleased with that. And what you can't see then underneath the box and to the rear of the motor is a simple steel box that contains the interference fit coupler that we built for the coupling the motor to the drive shaft. There is no clutch. We shift without the clutch when we shift. And I found that I drive mostly in third gear, and that works pretty nice for me. The little round device there towards the rear is the Toyota MR2 power steering pump. It's an electric device. It has a controller on it. And since we've hooked this up, it has not burped. It's been the most reliable, beautiful piece of engineering I've ever run across. It just works, and I'm simply delighted with it. They're hard to come by now. I understand that it's the power steering booster of choice for most of the hot rod guys who don't want to put things hanging off the front of their crate motors. But I did find one at a wrecking yard, and it works like a champ. Finally, back here we have a 12-volt battery and the power brake vacuum pump. You notice I've got some foam insulation for sound control around the vacuum pump, and it's completely lined with Dynamat underneath. And it still makes more noise than I like, but most of the time it's not too objectionable. The reason for the 12-volt battery is that I like to shut the DC-DC converter off when the car's not running. The DC-DC runs when the car's in motion, and it also runs when charging. But in between those times, this 12-volt battery handles the chore of keeping the GPS speedometer synced up with the satellite, as well as keeping the radio station presets loaded. And that's about all it does. So pretty lightly loaded, and not heavily used, but fully recharged by the DC-DC converter when necessary. Moving further to the back, we'll wind up our tour taking a look at the J1772 port that sits right where the gas filler used to be. And this is one of Dave Kurzel's aluminum units, and it's a pretty nice piece of bling. And coupled with the AVC2, it works a champ. It really does nicely. So that's a quick walking tour of the car. Let me button things up and we'll go for a ride. Okay, let's go for a little ride. What do you say? The startup sequence for the car really couldn't be easier. You stick the key in the former ignition and turn it. You may notice there's an amber light on the dashboard that indicates that we're in pre-charge mode. Now that light is turned off, we're pre-charged and ready to go. The main contactors are in play. Take the parking brake off, put it in reverse, and off we go. That noise you heard there is the cooling fan for the cooling system. It runs full time. The cooling system itself is maybe a little undersized for the car. I've got the twin or the dual Dural setup that EVTV sells, which is quite adequate for getting around town, but you take it on the highway, it doesn't quite cut it. And the result is that I've been into thermal derating on the DMOC a time or two, and that's a bit disconcerting at 65 miles an hour in traffic. The power steering, as you saw the Toyota power steering pump, very, very nice. This has worked a champ since day one. The steering feel is nice, a perfect level of effort. There's a controller on there, so you don't really have to do anything with it other than give it power, and it senses when it needs inputs, and it will automatically uprate and downrate the amount of boost that it gives based upon how much is necessary. So it's a very good feel in the power steering. The power brakes, you saw the power brake vacuum pump under the hood. In my mind, it's a little bit noisy. You may not be hearing anything of it here, but it bothered me a bit when I was putting it together. But you put the hood on it, and with the nice sound deadening around it, the Dynamat and such, is pretty good. I start off in third most of the time. The acceleration feels about the same as my Nissan Leaf in that gear, and it's perfectly adequate for getting around town. I have the motor capped at 6,000 RPMs, not for the motor, but for the transaxle. This motor, according to the spec sheet, will scream at 8, 9, 10, 12,000 RPMs, which is pretty amazing. Which means I could just leave it in third and go 65 or 70, but I don't, because the transaxle, the transmission, is not designed for that. It's designed for the piston motor that pretty much capped at about 6,000 RPM, so I kept that cap, which means that I do upshift for higher speeds. And when I get on the highway, I'll usually start in third and then upshift to fourth, and I have had it in fifth. 65 miles an hour on the highway is just no big deal. And despite the fact that the stance is a bit askew, with the nose too high and the tail too low, it's very stable, very straight ahead. Take your hands off the wheel, it stays where it's supposed to. And I really have been thrilled with the way this car drives. We're coming up on Highway 620 now, where I can wind it up just a little bit more. So when we come to a stop up here at the right turn lane, I'm going to put it in second gear, and we'll start in second and do an upshift to third, so you can see what that's all about. I'm decelerating into the stop here using the regenerative braking. One pedal driving is really pretty fascinating, and because of the fact that I can use the last bit of pedal travel to invoke the regen means that it's like riding power brakes. So these brake pads should last just short of forever. I'm going to let the light change before we start busting out here. Traffic clips along at a pretty good pace here on the highway. Okay, I think we have a clearing. We're in second gear, and you may sense, I don't know if you can sense this, we got a traffic stop up ahead, but it accelerates pretty nicely. I'll wind it up and then do the upshift to third. And because there's no inertia on the flywheel, because there's no flywheel, you just put it in the gate for the next gear, and as the synchro meshes the two gear sets, it literally pulls itself in. It's no muss, no bother. Really quite happy. And I can upshift to fourth just as easily. Except now we're coming to a stop. So we'll start third. Pretty good for just getting around town. So this car has pretty much exceeded my expectations. It drives like a real car. Power brakes, power steering make it quite useful. I will tell you, I don't have the air conditioning compressor charged with Freon yet. I've been kind of holding off on that, and I may not hold off any longer. The control head that comes with the Bendling compressor is really pretty ugly. I mean, it's a big beige colored box with buttons on it. It controls the PWM signals to the compressor that essentially controls its RPM rate, how fast it goes. And I don't really see a place to put it here. And what I'd ideally like to do is to tie it into the original air conditioning controls. Now the switch turns on the fans, and that's very good. The little ring out here is connected to a potentiometer that controls the temperature. And I'd like to put that on some sort of device that would convert that to PWM to drive my compressor. And that's going to take a little homework on my part, and I've got to pull it apart and see whether it's a 0 to 5 or a 0 to 12 rheostat, and get the right circuit board accordingly to convert that to PWM. In the meantime, though, because it's so darn hot, I think I may just go ahead and get it charged and put the controller in the glove box, get it out of sight. And who knows, it may stay there forever. That funny thing about projects and how that works. Looks like something going on at the park today. It's a lot of fun. So I've given you a little tour of our neighborhood here. It's a nice place to live. We like it. I was talking about the effect of the car. I did get a new Nissan Leaf. My 5-year lease ran out on the first one, and they made me an offer I couldn't refuse on a new one, so I just took them up on it. And frankly, it's a 3-year lease this time, and since I put a deposit on a Tesla Model 3 along with 350,000 of my other close friends, I don't really expect to see that for 3 years, so that Leaf will just kind of be marking time for us until the Tesla arrives. In the meantime, this is my daily driver. I rarely take the Leaf out of the driveway, except when I'm going somewhere with my lovely wife, who will ride on the TD occasionally, actually on a very specific time frame. She has a standing hair appointment with her beautician on Saturday mornings. So Friday night, date night, I can usually coax her into the car if the weather is nice, because she knows that her hair will be put back in order the following morning. So that's how that works. She's okay riding in this one, and will be even more okay once the air conditioning is running. So we'll take another quick turn around the block and head back into the docking station, into the mothership. I don't think I spent any time talking about the EVIC, and I really need to. It's a lovely little device. Not sure whether it's picking up on the camera or not, but it gives me all the information I need on the electrical systems, the motor temperature, the inverter temperature, RPMs, current in and out in amps, so for both discharge and charge, it's there. The current traction pack voltage, and a piece that's still under some construction, the state of charge. There's a little battery indicator there. There's also an amp counter, which frankly is not working yet. Jack tells me that the new device that was part of his battery measurement system will be programmed into the next release of JevQ, and I'm just going to hang on for that. I can pretty easily calculate where I am in the state of charge. This Better Place battery pack is actually a good bit more linear than the lithium iron phosphate cells we've worked with before. So as I monitor the pack voltage and also monitor the miles driven, I can pretty well get a sense for where we are. Okay, so we're returning to the home base now. We'll pull this back in the garage, and I hope you've enjoyed this little drive around. I've enjoyed having you with me, so thanks for riding shotgun. We'll talk to you later.